Well, hello there. How you doing today? David Taub here, and we're going to talk a little bit about solid-state amps today. We got a couple different ones in the studio, and I wanted to show you some of the features and some of the different effects with some of these type amps. And we've been getting a lot of email requests about, amps and tone and effects and what's built into the amp and why. And I just have some small practice amps we're going to show you today, but we had some other modules on tube amps, and we're going to be doing more on that. But I want to talk a little bit about the solid-state amp. Generally, you're going to find that guitar players seem to be divided into the tube amp family or the solid-state amp family. A lot of times, guitar players are just all certain guitar players are just, they only want to play through tube amps, and they just love the tube amp sounds, and a lot of guitarists really like the solid-state amps. So personally, my live rig, I play more through tube amps. I just like the sound is a little bit of warmer, and just a little bit more of what I'm looking for tone-wise. However, the solid-state amps have gotten much better over the years, and the technology has improved tremendously. In the new modeling amps they have out now, solid states, they're really good stuff, and some they're a lot more affordable. And they're cheaper than, that's some of the big advantages of solid state, is that they're less expensive than tube amps generally, and also they don't require as much maintenance. Tube amps, you have to replace tubes, you have to get it biased every so often. Solid state amps don't have tubes in it. It's all solid state circuitry, so they don't require that kind of maintenance. So they're a little bit easier to maintain. A lot of what I'm doing in the studio here, because I have to keep the volume low to talk over it, I use solid-state amps. I do have a small little tube practice amp that I use sometimes, but I mainly use the solid-state. And I have the amp behind me that I use because I get a lot of emails about what amp are you using, what amp are you using, what amp are you using. And the reason I use it is because it's kind of cool sounding, but the main thing is that solid-state amps, you don't have to crank them to get a really decent tone. See, with tube amps, it's another thing. You really have to run them hot. You have to crank them up. And to get the tubes heated up, to get the voltages hot and high, and get the tubes talking back and forth, and then you start getting that real full-on warm tube overdrive or tube distortion or breaking up of the sound. And that's basically from the getting that tubes really warm and the volume high. Solid state amps you could play low and still have basically a similar tone than when it's loud, and that's one of the good things about them. So what I have here is, this is a solid state amp by a company called Line 6, and this is the Spider 1. Spider 1. They are now up to the Spider 3. They don't make this one anymore. You can still get them on eBay used, and if you're looking for a practice amp to kick around in your room, and it's a pretty good value, I think, because you get quite a bit for your money. And I'm going to go through some of the features of it and explain a little bit about this amp as a template that you could use when we're talking about solid-state amps in general. This is a 112 speaker. This is called a combo amp, meaning that the electronics or the amp circuitry and the speakers all in one cabinet, as opposed to if there was a separate head and then a separate cabinet. This is called a combo, meaning it's combination of both. Okay. Now this is 112, 50 watts. Okay. They also now make Spider. I also have another Spider 2 over here, and this is 30 watts. And now they make, I think, like a 30 watt, a 50 watt, a 70 watt, a 12 watt. They make all different wattages for different applications. The general trend right now with tube amps is more smaller, lower watt, 10, 12, 15 watts. And you have to be careful when talking about watts, because you're not comparing apples to apples. A 50 watt Line 6 amp might be considerably less loud than a 12 watt, orange amp. It just doesn't work that all watts are created equal. Okay. So, this amp, some of the features that I like, I'm just going to do some broad brush strokes at first with an amp, is I like it to have the built-in reverb, if it's a good sounding reverb unit. Especially tube amps have that nice, some of them that nice tank reverb. I like that. This has a built-in reverb on this particular model. And the reverb is just that, you hear reverberating, kind of wettens your sound and fills it up a little bit. Let me turn it up a little louder. Hear all that reverb now? It's a louder reverb. So if I play with that, the key of A minor. You get that real 50s kind of sound. And some people really like that. I personally like just a splash of reverb, so I usually keep it at on 3 or 2. So it's there, but it's not overwhelming. Playing through the Les Paul out of the bridge pickup here. So the amps that have the reverb built in is usually a nice thing if it's a good sounding reverb, because some reverbs sound better than others, and usually pay a little extra for that. This Spider 2 here does not have a reverb in it. I think the one above that one would have reverb, the model above it. A nice touch also on this amp and many solid state amps now is as a jack for headphones right in the front panel. That's a nice touch, because this way if you want to play and hear what it sounds like amplified, but you don't want to wake the kids, bother your neighbors, things like this, plug the headphones as a 1/4-inch jack right into it and put the headphones on and play away. That's kind of a very cool thing, and I recommend if you're going to be playing in your room and if you live in an apartment where you have neighbors, you definitely might want to consider getting a practice amp that has that headphone jack. A lot of the amps they make today have them. So that's a nice thing. It also has a switch for a foot pedal, meaning you can hook up a pedal and control the various effects through that by kicking it with your foot, by pressing it with your foot. So that's nice that you could plug the foot switch in it. Basically it has one EQ section for all the different sounds, meaning there's one set of bass, mid, and treble controls like on most amps. Sometimes when you have multiple channel amps, you'll have a different EQ for each channel. That's really nice. So let's say you have a lead channel 1, like a clean channel with mid-range lows and highs. Then channel 2 is like maybe your rhythm channel, mid, low, high, has an EQ there. Channel 3 EQ, that's pretty cool, but that gets very expensive having a separate EQ. Sometimes on your multiple channel amps you'll just have, even though you have 2 or 3 channels, you'll have one EQ for it. So if you're playing on channel 3 or channel 1 or channel 2, unless you physically change the settings, it's going to be the same for all the channels. Alright, again, continuing with broad brushstrokes, this has a channel volume, meaning the actual volume of the given channel. And what I like is I think it sounds a little bit better, and again, you'll have to fool around with your particular amp and see what you like, but I like keeping the channel volume pegged, full on, and controlling the overall volume through the master volume, which is right here on this amp. This amp has a master volume and a channel volume. So like, for instance, if I'm just playing clean, I'm just playing some basic, see, I could reduce the channel volume and crank up the master volume. But I generally like to crank the channel volume and have the channel running full throttle and in control with the master volume. But experiment with your amp and find what sounds best to your ears. This is just what I found seems to work the best for me. This amp, so I have my mid, bass, and treble. I generally like it a little bassier sounding because I generally play strats. I'm just playing a Les Paul today, but I like a lot of the bassy sounds. So I generally have my bass a little higher, the mids a little lower, and treble like in between the bass and the mids. This particular amp has some effects in it. I have some delay and some chorus, flange, and things of this nature. And I generally play with, sometimes, especially clean, with a little bit of chorus. Let me turn the chorus on. Here's it without the chorus. And again, some of your solid state amps will have the built-in effects, some don't. Okay, and sometimes the built-in effects on the amps don't sound all that great, you know, so you have to really give it a road test when you go to buy it to make sure, you know, you're getting the tones you want. You could always add the effect pedal or a multi-effect pedal and then run it to your amp. So just because an amp doesn't have the effects built in doesn't mean you can't have them. You just have to add them on to into the chain. This has, the chorus is not bad. Here's a couple of, just play a couple big sounding open chords. Now I'm going to kick on the chorus. Here, get a little wavy. I'm going to put it on kind of high. Just so you get... Hear that? Oh, got a little shimmery, a little modulation effect. And hear how it kind of fills the sound up, right? A little bit. That's a lot of chorus. I usually keep it just cracked a little bit. That's with the chorus, and reverb. Here's it no chorus. See, it's a lot drier without it. No reverb now, totally dry. That's pretty dry. There's a little reverb, and now a little bit of chorus. So the one thing is, a lot of times when you have the effects built into the amp, you don't have a lot of control over the individual effect. Like this, for instance, just says chorus, and it's like a scale. Do you want a little or a lot? If you have an individual pedal or a multi-effect pedal and you have a chorus effect, you can control the depth, the sweep, and you could really adjust it. And that's kind of cool. Having the ability to really control all of the different levels of each effect. A lot of times they don't have that in a lot of the amps. Some amps they do. This particular one, it's just pretty much chorus. You want it, you can go between like 1 and 10 or whatnot, you know, so you don't have a lot of control over the modulation, the sweep, but it's there, so I use it. Again, this is more of a practice amp. My live rig, which we'll go into one day, I do use a little chorus, and that I have full of control over the effect. This also has a delay, which is kind of cool also, so I could add a little bit of tape echo, a little echo, or a little delay, meaning the signal is then, there's a repeat. Here that delay is kind of fast, meaning from the time I hit the note to the time it delays. And I can control that. I can make it go a little faster or slower. A little less. Very fast delay. So it just kind of thickens or fattens the sound, and it could be kind of a cool thing to add, especially when used sparingly, you know. So that's kind of a cool thing. I was just plucking some open strings, but just showing you a little bit what you can do. Sometimes when I want to go for a real concert hall kind of sound, and I'll show you in a minute, I'll crank the distortion and then add the delay, and I'll play like that, and it really sounds kind of cool. The tape echo effect on this is more of like a kind of echoes what you're playing. So that's a little bit of like the old tape machines had echo, and I can control the amount of that. Very slight there, very fast. So it's almost like you don't hear it delay because it's right on the end. The delay time is very short. Okay. And there's a little tremolo effect. That's that real kind of like a tremolo arm kind of thing, where it's like that vibrating kind of effect. Hear it vibrate? That sounds nice with some chords even. Hear that tremolo kind of vibration? Here's a little faster. Hear that? It's kind of cool effect. Again, on this amp, you don't really have a lot of control over the effect other than, you know, do you want a lot of it or a little bit of it, okay? So, it's some kind of cool things built into it, into this particular model. Now, if you're not using effects much, you know, you remember this is what you're paying for when you buy these. So if you're not using effects, then don't get an amp that's all loaded up with effects if you're never going to use them. What sense is that? Then you're kind of wasting your money. Put that money into maybe the next bump up on an amp that doesn't have effects, right? Now let's get into some. Now, this is all basically through the clean, through one of the clean channels, the clean sounds of this amp. It's kind of cool. Again, I like the tube clean sound better than solid state clean sound, but because in the studio I use the smaller solid state just because I can get them quieter. They work. Now this amp has some amp models, meaning it's modeled after certain type of other sounds that you get maybe from a Fender Blackface or a heavy Mesa Boogie or a different modeling amps. They model certain sounds after the sounds of other amps. And this modeling technology has gotten really good over the past few years, and the solid state amps are getting better and better and better. Partly because in the past they used to, in order to change something about a solid state amp, they would have to retool the line because a lot of those changes would have to be in the hardware or deep in the circuitry of the amp. And that would require, you know, major changes and make it almost cost prohibitive for them to do it. It wouldn't be worth it. They wouldn't make any money. But the technology, especially the computer technology, has gotten so good lately that, especially over the last few years, now to make these changes, small changes in the amp, it's not a big deal because it just changes in the software, which they can do at a much, much lesser cost. So it allowed these amps to really step up and get a lot closer sounding to what they're trying to model them after. So this amp, you can get some twangy sounds, some bluesy, some crunch, some recto, and insane, which is a lot of gain. Okay, and I'll just take you, like, you can go from your clean to, like, let's go to a heavy distortion. Okay, maybe I'll just cut the drive back a little bit, and you could hear the amp kind of has quite a bit of gain to it. It's pretty saturated. Let's play some power chords. Pretty heavy. So basically I'm playing out of the most distorted channel, which they call insane here. And I have the distortion now. That's the other thing, drive. There's a drive level on this amp. Drive meaning, and you might hear these terms used synonymously, distortion, drive, overdrive, gain. A lot of times when you use the term overdrive, it's usually like a lighter distortion than gain. Like an overdrive pedal sometimes wouldn't have as much distortion in it as like a heavy metal pedal or something like that. So the drive and gain, though, is the amount of distortion. So if I cut back on that gain, as I'm playing a chord, let's say, see it's starting to clean it up and take out some of that drive. See, now it's much less. So now I don't have as much distortion as if I crank it. There, so now I'm back. So a lot of times, you know, a lot of players always play with their gain on 10 all the time, and I'm constantly switching it back and forth and changing it because I can get all these different tones.